or Samaritans for immediate support. If you need it or see, you can also visit minds.org.uk for further information.
No, sorry. External.
There's a couple of people with microphones on mute. If you could mute, please. Brilliant. Judy will post the information for the info line and Samaritans in the chat box.
This meeting is being recorded.
So today's session really is looking around, exploring what a healthy relationship with physical activity is and when it can become unhealthy for some of us. We're also looking to inform through our Q&A panel, through experts by experience and professionals who have supported them. And finally, to launch our new resources and tools that can support both individuals and the sport and physical activity sector. So why did we choose to focus on a healthy relationship with physical activity, launch new resources and a 4-week campaign led by experts experience on this topic? We know physical activity can be an amazing way to support our mental health. However, it isn't helpful for everyone all of the time. And it's important to recognise that some people can develop an unhealthy relationship with physical activity. And while this is the first time we've produced new guidance and resources, this topic isn't new to us at Mind. The conversation first started way back in 2017, following our Get Set to Go evaluation report, and then further included in Mind's research in July 2021, shown in the quote on screen. We've always worked to ensure that our information to both the public and to coaches and physical activity providers has been very balanced. And we first introduced this topic last year during our updated mental health awareness for sport and physical activity e-learning. We appreciate this is a nuanced message, especially as many people are not active enough to receive the physical and mental health benefits. But on the other hand, people experiencing difficulties with physical activity have found that this has been exacerbated during the last 20 months as a result of the pandemic. And while we saw some of the mental health support were paused or moved online, some of us reported an increase of over-exercising. This led us to commission a survey last year, and some of the findings showed us that over a third of people said they take part in physical activity, sport or exercise as a way to manage difficult feelings or emotions. 1 in 6 people take part in physical activity, sport or exercise when they're unwell, tired or injured. And that around 2 in 5 people say they feel guilty when they miss a session of physical activity, sport or exercise. And in the light of the survey results and the increasing report that some of us have experienced an unhealthy relationship with physical activity due to the pandemic, we developed a multidisciplinary working group last year in April, including experts by experience and professionals who have supported them. And over the last 10 months, we've been really busy and worked together to co-produce our toolkit guide on developing a relationship between physical activity and mental health. We've published new resources to support both the sport and physical activity sector and the public that are now available on our website, and launched a 4-week campaign which started yesterday and runs through to the 11th of February. So what is a healthy relationship with physical activity and when can it become unhealthy? Physical activity is personal, so we all have different preferences, tolerances and fitness levels. Some of us find short sessions suit us best and others enjoy being active for longer. But this can change over time. So some examples of having a healthy relationship can be really building rest into your routine to allow your body and mind to recover. You may have a balance of physical activity and alternative hobbies that don't involve physical activity, such as reading, playing a musical instrument, painting, or connecting with others. And you really enjoy taking part in the physical activity. For some of us, this isn't always the case, and we may experience an unhealthy relationship with physical activity. And some of those examples may be taking part when you no longer want to or enjoy it. You find you're still taking part when you're feeling unwell, tired, or uninjured. You may feel or experience feelings of guilt or feeling anxious when you aren't able to take part. You may also find that you're taking part in physical activity in secret or cancelling plans to connect with others so that you can exercise. It's important to remember this can affect anyone of any age. Anyone can develop an unhealthy relationship with physical activity, but it may be more prevalent or susceptible if you have certain types of mental health problems. People experiencing eating problems are 3.7 times more likely to experience an unhealthy relationship with physical activity. And though over-exercising may co-occur with an eating problem, it's important that we speak to that person to really explore their motivations for taking part and also their needs and experiences. People who experience exercise addiction, for example, to drugs, to alcohol or gambling, can also substitute one addiction for another. And this can be known as addiction replacement. An example of this might be a person who has alcohol addiction and they switch their addiction to physical activity if they have to reduce their alcohol intake but haven't been supported to address their difficult feelings. But we know from our work that people with a wide range of mental health problems such as anxiety, bipolar disorder and PTSD have also developed an unhealthy relationship with physical activity. So today we really want to focus on the importance of promoting a healthy relationship with physical activity, providing tips to support people who are experiencing an unhealthy relationship and how to start these conversations. There's very little research or insight into when physical activity can become unhealthy in a community and grassroots physical activity setting. In fact, it's a really rarely talked about subject. So we want to encourage everyone, part of the webinar today, but also from grassroots and community level, through to elite athletes and coaches, to be mindful of the signs of over-exercising and exercise addiction, as well as the importance of building rest days into physical activity routines. And the quote on screen only emphasises the importance of highlighting rest into the delivery of physical activity sessions. So I will now pass over to our wonderful host, Hayley Jarvis, who is Head of Physical Activity, and our guest speakers for the Q&A panel.
Fantastic. Thank you, Carla. And hopefully we will lose the slides so we get to see everyone's wonderful and beautiful faces. So obviously this is a hugely important campaign to Mind, to me personally, and actually something I said to Carla this week, that actually I feel this is probably one of the most important things we've talked about in the physical activity team. We all talk about using physical activity to live and stay well, but for so long we haven't raised the spotlight on this important issue, and as we've seen from the pandemic, it has really exacerbated today. So thank you for giving up your time today to join in this really important conversation, and in a second just want to introduce you to the amazing expert panel of speakers who will share a wide range of perspectives. So without further ado, I'm going to ask each of the panelists in turn to briefly introduce themselves and just share how they became involved in this work. So first, I want to come to Debbie, Debbie Butler. So Debbie is the chair of our multidisciplinary working group and expert by experience, and perhaps one of the first people that I had a conversation with about this just over a year ago. So over to Debbie.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. It's really good to be here. I got involved initially with Mind quite a few years ago, working on their physical activity advisory group. And then when that came to fold, I then was asked by Hayley if I would be interested in joining this group. And yes, and I volunteered myself to chair the group, which gives me time to focus a lot on what we're actually trying to do today, and in the Awareness Month as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Debbie, for all the support you've given us to get to this point. And I'm going to pass the baton in just a second to George Mycock. So George is the founder of My Own Minds, which we're going to hear more about today, board member of the Applied Psychologists in Physical Activity Network, and expert by experience. So over to George.
Hi, Hayley. Thank you, and thank you everyone for turning up today. Yeah, to be honest with you, I'm actually not 100% sure how it was I got the connection to come to be a part of this, but I do know that I obviously have a kind of a big interest in this area. I have lived experience with muscularity orientated forms of disordered eating and exercise addiction, and that's kind of my area of expertise. I'm starting my PhD in October, looking into those kind of experiences. And through My Own Minds, I do a lot of research and different tool developments, trying to raise awareness for this kind of stuff. So I'm really excited to be here and to be part of such a fantastic group.
Fantastic, thank you, George, and we're so excited to hear about your research and everything that's going on as well. So moving slightly closer to home, our next panel member is Catherine Hogan. So Catherine works in our policy and campaigns team at National Mind and is also an expert by experience.
Thanks, Hayley. So yeah, I'm Catherine. I'm currently doing a degree apprenticeship at Mind, and I'm in the policy and campaigns team at the moment while studying business management. But I became involved in this piece of work as an expert by experience because I've had an eating disorder with an element of compulsive movement. And I also wanted to offer a young person's perspective to this piece of work.
Fantastic, and so helpful to have that young person's perspective, especially with the rise of social media. And I definitely am no longer a young person. That's a long, far away thing. So moving more to academia, we're delighted to be joined by Dr. Paula Watson, who is a reader in exercise and health psychology at Liverpool John Moores University and co-chair of the Applied Psychologists in Physical Activity Network. And Paula was sat where you guys were, I think, last year. So welcome, Paula.
Thank you, Hayley, and thank you everyone for having me. Yes, I feel quite starstruck to be here on the panel with the panel, because this is how I first got involved with Mind. I came to the webinar last year and I just felt this is such an important topic. I've recently set up my own applied exercise psychology company, and we spend so much of our time within the field of physical activity and health, promoting physical activity. It's really important we think about that psychological relationship. So thank you, very excited to be here.
Fantastic. And last but definitely not least, representing the coaches and practitioners around the virtual table today is Martin Lewis. So Martin isn't the money man, he's the badminton man. So head of performance badminton at Nottingham University. And I guess you get sick of that joke, Martin, so apologies.
I'm the money spending expert, not saving. Thank you, Hayley. I'm, as Hayley's mentioned, I'm the head of performance badminton at University of Nottingham. I work with the elite performers through to the social club players as well here at the uni. As well as that, I do work out in the community, performance centres, county clubs, and also individuals. And for me being part of this group, one of those individuals that I do work with is Debbie, who's one of the chair members. And yeah, my experiences from working with Debs is hopefully what we will delve into a little bit later on in the webinar.
Fantastic.
Nice to meet everybody.
Thank you very much, Martin. I promise no more cheesy jokes for the rest of the session. So I think it's fair to say we've come on leaps and bounds over the last year since holding that first webinar, and some of you may have attended. It was called When Physical Activity Becomes a Problem, and I think it's been reinforced by the interest that we've had in today's session, but also the momentum that's built around the campaign and the people that have reached out to us to actually welcome this conversation, because it is something that many people struggle with, and it really resonates. So we want to get into it and explore this in more detail, because as I say, it is that nuanced message. On one hand, we're saying get active, it's good for your mental health, but we know that it can become too much of a good thing. So kicking off the panel discussion, just a simple question really. So why do we think this topic, an unhealthy relationship with physical activity, is difficult or rarely talked about, and why is it so important that we launched the campaign? And if it's okay, I'll come to you first, George.
Yeah, and I'm going to kind of preface this with, I'm going to try and be as succinct as I possibly can, but this is, with all the questions I'm sure we're going to be talking about today, there's going to be a lot I want to say. But I guess there's three kind of questions in that. The first is, why is it difficult? And I think normally that's due to the moral underpinning that we've given exercise. I think a lot in society in general, and in the fitness world and the sport world, often we term more exercise as a better person. And that can become, addicting, and also means it's quite difficult for us to question that, because that's such a nice thing to have, is this eternal source of moral, like, betterment. I can do more exercise and then feel like a better person. Why it's rarely talked about, kind of, again, usually due to that moral kind of underpinning, but I think also as human beings, we quite like the idea of a binary explanation, and exercise just being good, rather than it being maybe a little bit bad and maybe a little bit good, and then it being very complicated. It's much easier just to say exercise is great, do more exercise, bada bing, bada boom. And then a little bit on the end there as well, why is it important to raise awareness? There's quite a common term in research at the moment, and in wildlife, of mental health literacy. Understanding mental health seems to lead to help-seeking behaviour and also kind of early intervention. So the more we talk about it, the more people might recognise it in themselves and then seek help for it.
Fantastic, some huge issues there around our values, and it being such a grey area. And Debbie, I guess as chair of the group, how do you feel about this?
Well, from my lived experience, I've always found, since I started to exercise, with my mental health problems, I sat on the sofa for 10 years, basically, doing nothing. And I was encouraged one day to go into the kitchen from the living room to put kettle on. And initially I thought that was patronising for the way they were talking to me, but ever since then, my mental health team, when I have told them that I exercise, because I got off that sofa and managed, after having 3 mini strokes as well, to find exercise. And I was very lucky that I met a very inspirational lady at Nottingham University, and my life changed with that. But going back to why it's not talked about, I think is because we're also encouraged, everybody is encouraged to be active. Even now, my mental health team never ever mentions my exercise routines, and I do tell them. But it is a difficult subject. I also have an eating disorder where I'm compelled to do a lot of things. So for me, it's a bit of a lack of understanding of the problem, I think, is probably why it's not talked about. And I think working on this project with Mind has really opened my eyes, as well as other people.
Thank you, Debbie. There's so much to unpack, and as you say, it's so complicated. And as we say, that message on one hand is it's good for us, but for some of us, it often isn't all of the time. And Catherine, just thinking, as bringing your young person's perspective, like how do you feel for you and for the young people this sort of?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's really difficult to talk about having a problem with exercise when it's portrayed as like a lifestyle choice on like the whole fitness industry. It's a whole lifestyle choice on social media. And what I mean by that is that on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, the fitness industry is really influential in making us think that we should do more exercise. And this messaging can be really insensitive to those that are vulnerable to mental health conditions, already have pre-existing mental health conditions. So I think it's important to recognise that social media is a part of our everyday lives, and seeing posts always promoting the benefits of exercise means that we need to raise awareness of this topic so that people actually understand that over-exercising is a problem in itself. And many people can increase their physical activity levels without realising the impact on other aspects of their life, and it's really easy to deny there being a problem. And before you know it, it can spiral into something compulsive that you can't control. And I think it's really important that we raise awareness of this topic right now, because the pandemic has seen an eating disorder epidemic as such amongst young people, and over-exercising can only be a contributing factor towards developing an eating disorder as well.
And I think certainly how the world has changed, and the first thing we do in the morning is look at our phones. You know, some people don't even go to the toilet without them, you know, last thing at night, and it's reinforcing, isn't it, that flooding of that constant message, which for most of the population might be a good thing, but actually for lots of us, actually that's really triggering. And Paula, just to bring you in there around your views from your perspective.
Yeah, I think the psychological relationship with exercise is so rarely talked about. And I think, like Debbie said, I think people don't really understand or don't have an awareness of what an unhealthy relationship with exercise is. Because it's very much, it's about those messages, like Catherine was just talking about. It's the actual messages that are appearing on social media and in exercise communities. There's often a focus on looking a certain way, on training lots. The more you train, the better. No pain, no gain. And it's all associated with a very kind of outcome focused mindset. So do whatever it takes to get there without anyone stepping back and actually considering if it's a healthy approach. So I think it's so important that we're raising awareness of this, first to help prevent people getting in these situations in the first place, but secondly to help people recognize when exercise is becoming a problem and physical activity is becoming a problem, so they can seek support.
Definitely, and getting into those motivations, I think, is key. I'm just thinking, I've seen we've got Dr. Florence Kinnifick on the call, just thinking about some work we did around intrinsic motivation and doing it because you enjoy it, you can see the value because it makes you feel good, as you say, rather than those outcome focused. And I think is absolutely key. So we know that physical activity can be an incredibly positive coping strategy. But also it can be a way for some of us to avoid difficult emotions. And I guess that can make it really hard for us to recognise when support is needed with how we're feeling and when that spiral has begun. And I guess sort of moving on the conversation, I guess no meeting or no webinar can go by without us talking about the impact of the pandemic. And I think Catherine's already mentioned this. You know, we've been living in an uncertain time for the last 2 years. We've seen mental health need increase, and particularly around eating disorders. On one hand, we're seeing politicians, celebrities encouraging us to get active for our mental health like never before, and that's been welcomed. Obviously, it could also be, it was one of the only reasons, particularly during 2020, that we could leave our house. And I remember the debate about how long we could be out of the house for, and certainly in England there was no restriction on that. There was some guidance but no restriction. And one of the first interviews I undertook for this piece of work, one expert by experience was telling me that they were exercising for up to 10 hours a day. They were leaving the house once, but they were going out for 10 hours, which we know is then problematic. So I guess if you want to sort of loop back and think for all of us to have a think about how the pandemic has impacted on physical activity behaviours. And Catherine, if you don't mind me, as you brought it up, if that's okay, coming back to you first.
Sure. So yeah, I can only really speak on my behalf on this, but when I was put on furlough, I really struggled to feel the time and lacked control over how I could spend my days. And although I've had an eating disorder for most of my teen years, I think when the pandemic hit, it was the first time my issues around exercise became a very serious problem. And it was almost like replacing restrictive eating with over-exercise and using exercise as a means to compensate for food or feel productive, because I had no other means to get through each day. And it was particularly difficult to talk about given the positive messaging around exercise, which was becoming increasingly prevalent over Instagram and TikTok. And I essentially ended up doing a lot of exercise in secret and becoming addicted to exercise. So I share more about my experiences in my blog I've written that you can find on the website. But I think ultimately the pandemic meant that we had more time to try new physical activities, and the public received a lot of messaging that we should be getting more active to look after our well-being. But this was very inconsiderate to people with mental health conditions, who have obsessive tendencies or eating disorders, or people with physical disabilities that exercising might not even be suitable, appropriate, or even an accessible option to look after our own well-being.
And I think it raises some key issues there that we've certainly been talking about as a working group, about the need for triggers, for warnings, but also the reality that it doesn't work for everyone all the time. And I think that's absolutely key. People tell you to be active, they don't tell you how much is too much. And I think that's something that, as we know, is incredibly individual. Debbie, I know we've talked a lot about the pandemic and your exercise. Can we bring you in here?
Yeah, sure, fine. And there's two parts to my experience. I think the first one, when we were basically told or guided that we could only go out for a certain amount of time, or the restrictions. Initially, when we went into lockdown, I wouldn't go out. My daughter encouraged me to go out at least for a walk around the block. But that is when I really got addicted to it. During the pandemic, previous to the pandemic, I did an awful lot of exercise. But during the pandemic, I walked more and more and more and more. And it was the only way I found to actually get through each day. I was overworking as well. I do a lot of public contributor work into mental health research. And so my work was being disrupted because of that, and to this day still is. So during the pandemic, I got more and more addicted, but also was then diagnosed with an eating disorder. And then after the pandemic, I still over-exercise. And I feel compelled this last few mornings where everybody's woken up to it being very frosty. I live at the top of a big hill, so I found it really difficult to go out until the frost has gone. And when that has happened, in my head, I cannot accept the fact that if I don't go out first thing, that I will get through the day. So if I don't go out first thing in the morning, the day ahead is going to be very, very hard. And I think Martin's noticed that a bit as well from when we've been talking about it.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, Debs, whenever we meet, and you can tell straight away the mood's down, and you ask why, are you okay? And it's definitely something that has grown since the pandemic has started for Debs. And it's my conversation with Debs goes, how do you try and find ways around thinking differently about what you want to do? Some of the things that I found within the pandemic, what we do for the badminton group here at the uni, we had a structured week, and structured into that week was rest. And I think somebody's touched on it earlier, rest is not promoted in any way, shape or form like actually doing exercises. And that is a big thing, obviously, for myself as a coach, and something through that, obviously, since the pandemic and everything going online and the government's messages, there's not much rest or trying to structure a week where you are managing how much you are doing. And I think that's definitely something that I've seen within the recent past anyway. I do think it's great to promote something like the Joe Wicks exercise program was great for kids, and the kids went hell for leather right at the start. I'm sure some carried it on all the way through, but again, it's just exercise. You've got to get up, you've got to do your Joe Wicks, you've got to do this, you've got to. But where is the actual structure for me to manage where obviously over exercising can go?
Fantastic, thank you, Martin. And yeah, just thinking, I am somebody that does some of Joe Wicks's HIIT sessions, and I know certainly on his podcast as well, he talks about rest days, and I think people understanding that need for structure, that need for rest, and the need for variety, I think is absolutely key, because certainly this is talked about more at an elite level, but at a grassroots level, it's not necessarily a concept that's introduced to people to understand that if we do the same thing all the time, it's not good for our mind or our bodies. That's one of the reasons, a shameless plug for our Spotlight on Rest Day, which is on the 26th of January, where we're actually going to encourage people to share how they rest, and I guess nominate and encourage others to get involved in that. But I think the pandemic has really, it's changed us all, hasn't it? We've changed how we work, how we live. I think for me, just listening to you all, thinking about that lack of access to services. So as mental health services either closed or went online, we had to find something else to fill that space, or to fill that space of work, and it became exercise, and actually that became too much and a problem in itself. So one of the things certainly we're keen to do is to promote that. It can be one of the things that can be helpful to us, but also that we need other things in our life, because if we rely just on one thing, that too can become a compulsion, obsession, and a problem in itself. So just thinking about the role of the sports and physical activity sector. And I think Martin sort of started to pull out some of this, but I guess I'd like the panel to really share, thinking about, as in the room, some of the signs and symptoms that coaches, instructors, PTs, workout buddies, all of us really can look out for, that somebody is at risk of, or perhaps experiencing or starting to experience that unhealthy relationship with physical activity. So what are the signs and symptoms, but also what are some of the first steps or some of the challenges that you've took to redefining that relationship? And we know that this is an ongoing challenge, and it's not like there's a quick fix. I know it's something I've spent a lot of time reflecting on. So coming to George first, if that's okay, what are the signs and symptoms?
Yeah, and as I said, I'm not going to list them all off because I'm sure other people will add, but I think one really key one is the dependency on exercise and needing it for emotional regulation, or needing it for anything, or it might even just be the fear of what will happen if I don't do it. And there's a really interesting paper by a researcher called Mike Trott who looked into exercise addiction, and part of the definition of exercise addiction is that someone is dependent on it. And he kind of estimated or concluded that roughly 5% of uni students, 5.5% of amateur athletes, and 8% of gym goers have the clinical cutoff for exercise addiction. So it's so common, this dependency on exercise, and also it also encompasses the compulsion to do it. But it's not, we've spoken about today that it's not talked about the issues that can come with people who, when you are dependent on exercise, when you need to do it every single day, a certain amount constantly, not only from, even just from a performance perspective, we've got a performance coach here, and even just for a sports coach, if you want your athletes to do better, they have to periodize their training, they have to rest, they have to, so even from that side, let alone the health. And then there are a whole host of health problems if you over exercise. You kind of fall into REDS, relative energy deficiency in sport, you can do anyway. So you get weakening of bones, reduction of immune system, as well as all the psychosocial problems. And just from my personal lived experience, when I was at uni, I would miss lectures. I wouldn't go and see my friends because I felt like I had to go and lift weights. I had to get a pump every single day. Otherwise, I was going to lose my muscle. I was going to lose the respect from my friends. I was not going to have that emotional regulation because I was dependent on it. And I think one of the ways that I got better or got out of that was through building, I do a podcast as well called the Mind Minds podcast, and I spoke with Dr. Amy Ezeki on that, and she did a brilliant analogy where she said a lot of people have their life on a pillar where exercise is their thing on the base that holds it together, and really what you need to do is build a pyramid, so you have lots of different things, and then if one of them gets knocked away, you can't do it, you've got all these other things holding it up. And also just for the coaches and people out there, I'm working on a project currently with Nottingham University and the Helm team, where we've come up with we've interviewed lots of people with lived experience and made an animation, which is very cool. It's about 3 minutes long, along with some kind of training tool that's going to be, one is orientated towards personal trainers and coaches, and one is orientated towards GPs, but will hopefully help kind of teach about this kind of stuff. So look out for that. Go follow Mind Minds, and you'll see it there. Anyway, I've taken up way too much time.
No, that's fantastic, George, and we will certainly circulate those links. I think that's absolutely key. I like the pillar analogy. I've seen something recently about always having like a wheel with spokes and the different components. So it's not just one thing. And I certainly think about this and my dependency on running, and actually needing to add other things that aren't physical into that wheel for myself. So moving on to Debbie there. How about for you, the signs and symptoms? Obviously you and Martin have worked together to address some of this.
Yeah, I think I think as somebody with, and I openly admit I do have mental health problems, one of which is a borderline personality disorder, and part of that is well, I won't say usually, but many women that, or people that are diagnosed with that, do have an eating disorder as well. And for me, the compulsion not to eat also transferred into another compulsion to exercise. The only way I can describe it, which hopefully is right, is I'm like that proverbial swan on the lake. I'm floating across on the top, but my legs need to keep going. And the only way I can stop that is by actually going out of the house and walking or running. And quite often when I see Martin, it's a 2-hour walk, to where we meet, and I will walk there. And I think the signs and symptoms for that are just my legs just go crazy, and finding it difficult, like I was talking about earlier, finding it difficult to actually express what's happening with the addiction not to eat food, the addiction to exercise, the addiction to work. It's like you don't get, I think one of the panel members previously has talked about there isn't an AA for somebody who ever exercises. And I think, the symptoms need to be looked at. And I think that's part of our awareness month this month, that we can look at that. I hope that helps. It's probably a bit wordy, but I think that's my experience.
I think there's some real key messages there around looking deeper and beyond that surface level, and getting to know participants so that you can understand what's going on with them. And I think, George, it also ties in very neatly to what George said about noticing that change in behaviour and that prioritisation of being active over and above other things. And obviously, Martin, you must have had a conversation, and it could have been a difficult conversation with Debbie about this. So how, from a coach's perspective?
Yeah, obviously, as a coach, you get to know people that you work with, and what makes them tick, because that's what you have to do to try and get the best out of the player, obviously on a performance level. But there's definitely the signs that jump out. I'll take that. If she walks in the room and there's lack of eye contact and things like that, that you want to prompt the question: Are you okay? How are things? I think luckily we've built up a relationship, myself and Debs, over time, where now she's very open. It was quite difficult at the start, but it's there. You're asking the question, are you okay? Waiting for a response. She doesn't have to divulge any information, but then we get on with the session. If I think of signs and symptoms for some of my elite athletes, working with obviously a team of people that work in the gym, there are times where players are in the gym more over and above the schedule that the players are given, and that prompts a question then to ask, is that, obviously for myself, is that a performance related, or is that it could spark off a conversation which may lead on to I feel as though I really need to do this, or and then that conversation can flow. But I think it comes from you need to have that trust for somebody to open up, and it's difficult questions are asked, and I hold my hands up, and that's something that myself, in the position that I'm in, I feel as though I can do that, and I know that's going to be hard for a lot of people, but sometimes that doesn't have to be with a coach. It could be with a family member who you have a trust in. It could be a very good friend that you may have that trust there already, that you can ask the question. Sometimes you get worried about offending people, but if you're worried, then there's obviously something that you could do, you maybe should do, to help that person who you think may be struggling.
I think that's fantastic. I mean, doing what's right isn't always easy, and having those conversations and understanding the motivations, I think, is key. But I guess liken it as often we do around physical health. If we were concerned someone was you know, training hard with a physical injury, and as a coach, or as Coach Haley on a Saturday morning, you know, and I was spotting someone limping, I'd want to know about that. And I've got a duty of care. So as you say, it's just trying to open up those conversations. And just come in to Catherine and then Paula, if that's okay. I think this is just such an important question. Your views on the signs and symptoms and steps towards redefining that relationship.
Sure. So when I was trying to think about how to answer this question, I found it really difficult, because it's really difficult to tell from the outside if someone has a problem with physical activity, because they probably won't share in detail how much exercise they're doing in reality. And for me personally, I felt a lot of shame that stopped me from speaking about my addiction with exercise. So I'd say one of the main symptoms is exercising in secret. And that's quite hard to spot, but it is a symptom. And exercising in secret because if there's something wrong, making excuses to withdraw from social situations to work out, or even walking excessively to places far away when public transport options are available, could all be signs. And I became quite irritable and fatigued all the time, which ultimately impacted my relationship with others. And I knew there was a problem when I started not to enjoy the exercise I was doing and feeling like I had to do it anyway for whatever reason. So I think it's all about making sure that exercise is done in moderation, and there needs to be a healthier balance, and understanding what is suitable for yourself or for one person may not actually be suitable for another as well.
Thanks, Catherine. So individual, and such a need for understanding those motivations, I think, is key. And just Paula, I guess giving you the final word on this question, if that's okay.
Yeah, no, it's so interesting listening to Catherine there as well, because I'm thinking one of the challenges here is it's almost such a fine line, certainly what it looks like from the outside, looking at somebody who exercises often and actually has a very healthy relationship with it and enjoys it and wants to do it, than somebody that is tipping into that where it's affecting their mental and their physical health. And one of the things that Catherine touched on there is that feeling like when it's becoming something you have to do, and feeling you're not enjoying it anymore. And I just wanted to bring us back then to think about the role, you know, for physical activity providers, the role they might play in prevention and promoting that healthy relationship from the start, which also links into what Martin said about building that trust with your participants. And just to share an example, recently we ran a research project during the pandemic with adolescent girls who we know are amongst the least active population, but they're also amongst the most vulnerable for developing eating disorders and an unhealthy relationship with their body. So we had it's called the Horizon Project, run brilliantly by Emma Cowley. I can't mention Horizon without mentioning Emma, at Liverpool John Moores Uni. And we had MSc students running behaviour change sessions over Zoom with the girls every week. And what we were doing is we were helping the girls find a physical activity they enjoyed. We were helping reduce pressure on them, help them understand the importance of rest and the importance of building up physical activity gradually. And what we found, it's been really successful, this project, and we found that by the end of it, the kind of feedback we were getting from the girls is actually exercise has changed now. It's changed from something that I felt I had to do to something I want to do, and appreciating, you know, developing a healthy relationship with their body. So focusing on what their body can do rather than what their body looks like. And I think there's a lot that we can do from the outset in the conversations we have with people about sport and physical activity. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but it's very rare that I'd go to an exercise class or a sports class and hear the instructor mentioning about structuring your week, about the importance of taking rest. It would more likely be, make sure you're back here tomorrow, the next day, next week. And that's what you see everyone else doing. So I think, yeah, there's a lot we can potentially do to help raising that awareness. Sorry, I don't know, I've digressed from your question a bit there.
No, I think that's really helpful, thinking about that prevention space, because it is so personal. We're talking fine lines, it's a grey area, and it is such a nuanced message, which why getting to this point has been so important for us. And I guess it's kind of encouraging people to reflect on why they do it and what they enjoy from it, and the rest and what else you can do, what else have you got in your wheel or in your pyramid to look after yourself. But I guess I was just reflecting on a very personal level of this is an area of that's quite close to my heart and something I struggle with. But I was thinking about just last week I tried a Get Fit with Rick session. I don't know if anyone's tried it. I'm not here to plug Get Fit with Rick, but I certainly, it was the most fun I'd had in 20 minutes doing physical activity in a long time. It was using 80s tunes. It was a step-based program. And it made such a difference to do something so different from the high intensity, high volume, distance endurance that I constantly put my body through. And I laughed, I smiled, I told my husband, I told my whole team about it. And I think, you know, that sense of fun, that inner child, why we're doing it in the first place. And it was just 20 minutes, which in itself was a challenge for me. So I think that prevention is huge. So moving on to our final couple of questions, and I guess keeping with a theme of what we can do, what the sector can do. I just want to sort of pull out, what can coaches, personal trainers and fitness instructors do to support people at risk of or experiencing an unhealthy relationship with physical activity? So if you had to give a few tips to instructors, what would you like to see from them? And we'll loop back to George first, if that's okay.
Yeah, and as I said, with my work through My Minds, I often work in kind of the fitness and sporting world. So I do speak to coaches and PTs quite a lot. And one thing that I can't stress enough, and I maybe will say it later on the webinar as well, but it's not your job to fix something. It's not, you can't put that pressure on yourself in order to fix something. I think so often personal trainers and coaches hear about exercise addiction and think, and this unhealthy relationship with exercise, and they think, oh God, I have to say something perfect in order to stop this from being a problem. That's not your position. I think you have two responsibilities. You have one, which is creating a supportive environment. So an environment where, I know Catherine mentioned she had some shame around opening up about exercise. Create an environment where people can feel like they don't need to have shame, or, at least help break that down. And two is reducing the stresses. So reducing things that can make people more likely to. So, not going on about how much someone's exercising to them, tell them to do more and more and more, and not commenting on their body or commenting on the way they eat. Debbie's mentioned this, there's a really close link with disordered eating and exercise addiction. So, being careful around those kind of things. And also I'm aware I've plugged several of the things I'm doing at the moment already, but I'm going to plug one more thing. As part of that kind of trying to develop a supporting environment, I've started a new project with some support from Mind called the Gym Goers Guide, which is basically trying to address that idea of how to make an environment supportive for gym goers. Rather than kind of signposting people straight to eating disorder charities or to a mental health charity, the Gym Goers Guide is going to be a online one-stop place where there's some easy to understand information about certain mental health things that are directed directly towards gym goers, and then also help with signposting. And I've got a fantastic team of lived experience and clinical experience, and we're also going to have some kind of clinical peer reviewing of the articles and information we have up there, so it's definitely legit. And if anyone's interested in helping with that, feel free. I've seen some comments come up saying they think it sounds great. So yeah, feel free to contact me if you want to help with writing articles, etc. Yeah, but it's going to be fantastic, and I'm really excited for it. So look out for that in the future as well.
Fantastic, thank you, George. And we've already heard a lot from the group around the importance of rest, the building the relationship, the trust, that supportive environment, but also around the in the chat are some really good points about boundaries, and actually coaches and PTs knowing their boundaries. They're not dietitians, and knowing which bit of the jigsaw they can help with, and when to signpost out, whether that's around diet and nutrition, or whether that's around further mental health support. So just bringing Paula in on that question, just briefly from your perspective before we, I'm conscious of time and I don't want to get myself in trouble.
Okay, I'll take the hint. Yeah, no, I think actually when we're talking about the signposting, I guess I will also bring a shameless plug in, but it's worth coaches and individuals being aware of the sport and exercise psychology community. I think often people think of sports psychologists as people who work with elite athletes and in high performance settings, but actually exercise psychology, physical activity psychology is a really growing field. And I know I've seen some names in the chat, some of my fellow psychologists are on the call. So people see a bit of stigma around psychology, but I'd encourage you to reach out. We're ultimately here to help people explore their challenges and help people find solutions that work for them. If anybody does want to get in touch, I think we can probably share my website, Made Up to Move. But yeah, other than that, I think the really important thing is not being afraid to talk about it, and building that trust.
Fantastic. So we could talk all day, but I'm conscious we've only got an hour for this webinar. So just going to ask each of the panelists for, in one sentence, their golden nugget or a piece of advice to people that are listening and for people to take away today. So just coming to George. Sorry, George, you're first on my list, if that's okay.
One sentence, okay. It's not your job to fix the problem, comma. Look, your job is to be supportive and kind.
Fabulous. Catherine?
If exercise feels like it's becoming a problem for either yourself or someone else, don't feel afraid to start the conversation and confide in someone you trust, such as a family friend, a coach, personal trainer, local Mind, as there are sources of support available out there.
Fantastic. Yeah, don't suffer alone. Coming across to Debbie.
Yeah, I think we've discussed, and George said it as well, about you can't change the issues, but you can be supportive. But also I think for me, the biggest thing, and I know sometimes when I talk to Martin, I walk away and I feel guilty for saying things, because for me, as coaches and physical instructors and anything else to do with physical activity, you need to look after yourself as well.
Huge advocate for self-care. And we'll switch across to Martin, who's next to you on my screen.
I hope you've all enjoyed today, guys. But for me, it's really important to listen and not be judgmental. The listening to what is actually said and being thoughtful with your response is a big thing for me.
Fantastic. Listen and also remember you're only human. Celebrate humanness. I think that's key. And finally, Paula.
And mine is, yeah, I feel like a broken record, but it's really about getting those healthy messages in from day one. If you're a sports coach, helping people understand the importance of rest, helping them focus on what their body can do rather than what it looks like, and helping them value themselves as a person beyond just the sport or the physical activity.
Well, a massive thank you for me. So I'm going to quickly pass the baton back to Carla so we can wrap up. But a huge thank you to everyone. And we will come back to any of the questions. We'll look through the comments in the chat and we'll collate some responses and share those links and everything with you. So back over to Carla.
Amazing, thanks Hayley, and thank you to everyone, all of our Q&A panelists today. I just wanted to say how insightful and powerful the last 40 minutes have been. Like, huge thank you for coming along and sharing your experiences today, and how the sector can help with building a healthy relationship. So I just wanted to finish really with the launch of our resources. So we're really excited to launch our resources today for both the sport and physical activity sector and the general public. Just hoping that my PowerPoint is working there. So we have co-produced these resources with experts by experience and people who have supported them. And these are now available on our website. So we have both infographics and short guides for both the sector and the public. And this really goes into depth of what is the healthy or what is an unhealthy relationship with physical activity, and how to spot those signs and symptoms, including tips to support people experiencing an unhealthy relationship, and really how the sector can take steps to support people. And these resources really do complement our campaign, which is running till the 11th of February, and will really help us raise awareness and of the importance of developing that healthy relationship, but also the importance of taking rest days, which we've discussed quite a lot during the Q&A panel today. So just the final pitch really to the next event that we've got as part of our campaign is the Spotlight on Rest Day on the 26th of February. And we hope to encourage everyone in today's webinar to really join in the day and share how you rest to help your body and mind recover. We will be launching on the 26th of January several social media posts, which would be really great if you can like and comment. So Twitter and Instagram is @MindCharity, and our Facebook is @Mind for Better Mental Health. Including these also with the resources, information and blogs that we've got on our website, there are also organisations that can support individuals, including NHS primary and secondary care, listening services, Minds Info Line, peer support platform, and Side by Side. So Judy will also pop these information info lines into the chat now. But I'd just like to say a massive thank you to everyone for joining the webinar today. We will be sending out an evaluation form, so it would be really fantastic if you could fill that in. But again, a massive shout out to our Q&A panelists. Thank you for all the information and questions in the chat, and a huge thank you to our host, Hayley Jarvis. So yeah, I hope everyone has an absolutely wonderful day, and thank you for joining in. Take care.
Thanks everyone, and a huge thank you to all the panel, to Debbie, George, Kathleen, Paula and Martin, and for everyone that's helped behind the scenes. We've had a big working group that's working on this, everyone at Mind, and a special thank you to Debbie for hosting the group, and Carla who's led probably one of our most challenging pieces of work for a physical activity team, but so needed. So just to loop back to where we started, in terms of taking care of yourself, you know, just really wanted to remind you, if anything from today has sparked concern for yourself or others, a family member, participant, you know, ask twice, reach out for support. There is support in the chat, and a huge thank you for making the time and space. So take good care and stay in touch.